for students who don't fit the mold, you will show up exactly in the way that you need to at the time that you need to. But don't be humble about your purpose. You can be humble about learning new things. You should always be curious. But if you know what your purpose is, that is something no one else can take from you. They may not like the way you speak. They may not like the way you look. They may not like the clothes that you wear. But the results that you yield, they can't deny that.
Welcome to Momentum Now by MVP, a career-focused podcast that delves into the stories of seasoned professionals, charismatic leaders, and passionate catalysts. Join us as we explore their career achievements, the challenges they've overcome, and their advice for young professionals of color navigating a fulfilling career journey. Today, our co-hosts Bob Brooks and Kara McFarlane speak with the award-winning business strategist and founder of BND Consulting Group, Brittany S. Hale. Brittany shares her lessons as an undefeated trial attorney and entrepreneur, the benefits of embracing life's unexpected plot twists, becoming a high-impact leader, and how following your life's passion can create a rewarding and fulfilling career.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Momentum Now. I'm here with my co-host, Bob Brooks. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Karen. It's great to be here with you today. I hope you're having a great day.
I'm having a great day, but you know why it's better? I got one of my favorite people on as a guest.
Nice. Fantastic.
Ms. Brittany S. Hale.
Brittany.
Brittany.
Hello. Hi, Karen. Hi, Bob. Karen,
Hey.
you made my day with that. I just,
I love
can't get it together.
Well, I have the good fortune of talking to Brittany quite often, and I think I shared this with her the other day, is that I always learn something new from her. Like, I feel like she's one of my teachers. So just like a super quick background, because we're going to let Brittany talk about herself, right? Brittany is an undefeated trial attorney. She was the interim COO of Digital Undivided, which is really focused on, Black and Latina, entrepreneurship and success. And she's also founder of BND Consulting, which focuses on DEI and leadership and, again, successful futures for people, right? And so, one other thing, I think it was earlier in your career, but I have to mention it. You worked with the Obama administration, right?
Yes.
You're Obama. So, I mean, that's just like super cool, right? So I just have to say that because I'm jelly.
What a great.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
What a great
For the
journey.
invention of fire.
I haven't mentioned everything, but we're gonna need more than 30 minutes.
Yeah, maybe we start there. Let's start with maybe major career milestones. How did you get here, and what triggered the founding of BND Consulting Group?
Yes. Well, I like to self-describe as a millennial multi-hyphenate. I learned to embrace the plot twist, and more often than not, when I spoke to people I admired, I thought it was a very linear, very regimented. You went to college, you sought graduate education, you got this job, and then you ended up in this space. And for everyone I admired, instead of that straight line that I was expecting, their career looked something like this. And if you're listening, it's squiggles and lines and curves and angles and all of these things. So I decided to apply for and was accepted to the Obama Organizing Fellowship in my undergraduate career. And that really sparked my love for advocacy. And it was one of those rare moments in politics where your direct efforts resulted in a quick win, because I spent time knocking on doors and showing up in community spaces to connect with people, to learn why they either were going to vote for then candidate Barack Obama or not. And it even if they weren't, I had people tell me, get out of my face, turn around now. I had a lot of people who were very charged and activated, and it forced me to think about connection. It forced me to think about ways that I could use advocacy to connect with people. And so that's something I took with me. So I went to law school, and my first year legal writing professor, told me that I should be a trial attorney. And at the time, my thought about a trial attorney was what I saw in Law and Order SVU. And I was just like, so not, I don't yell and scream, and I'm just, I'm not like the person, those commercials you see on daytime television, if you've been injured in an accident and you need representation, call now. That wasn't me. And so throughout my career, I had the opportunity to work during my summers at various institutions, and that really colored my experience. So my first summer, I worked at a huge financial services company. And when I asked attorneys about why they went in-house, it was everything from my wife was going to leave me, to I was going to have a heart attack, to I wanted to have a family, to, my kids didn't know my name. And it was just, it was eye-opening. And so what I took from that was figuring out how I could try my best to create a career that was mine and that I wanted to lead. And so when I graduated, I went to work for another financial services company. So I worked at Bloomberg. And the first day, everyone who works at Bloomberg, regardless of where you're starting, you go to 731 Lexington, the big fancy building in Midtown, and you're handed Bloomberg by Bloomberg, and you are taught about the culture at Bloomberg. And there is this desire to spark innovation and spark creativity. And it was the first time I really started thinking about organizational culture and organizational design and leadership, because there were so many very clear choices made at Bloomberg. So, for example, barring any sort of physical disability, the elevators only stopped every 3 floors because they wanted to encourage people to be active. And so from there, I started off in securities litigation analysis, and that was really interesting. Karen, we talk about, getting the tea and, figuring out the drama. So I got like the financial services drama with various companies, but that advocacy piece was really missing. And so I wanted a more client-facing role. And then I pivoted toward a client-facing position when the opportunity presented itself. There's an in-house mentorship program, and that really was my opportunity to jump into the practice of law in a way that I hadn't previously done. From that point on, I went in-house in another company, and that's where I became the trial attorney. And again, just in my interview, I was really audacious, and many would say stupid, but we had a great interview. And at the end of it, I just wanted to know, if I was wasting my time. And so I said, can you see yourself offering me this position? And I figured if he said yes, then we're just one step closer, right? If that's one more yes closer to the offer. And if he said no, then I could learn the reasons why, and either I could convince him, or I could say thank you so much, and my time wasn't wasted. Fortunately, he said yes. No one's ever asked me that before. I think that's, he was taken aback, but also impressed. And that's where I was able to hone my advocacy skills. That's where I was able to begin to try cases. And that was the genesis for starting BND Consulting Group, because when you are trying cases, you have what's called voir dire, which is your jury selection. And the voir dire process is where you and your adversary, the person you're trying the case against, you all get to pick the jurors. Now, we typically think of bias in a bad way, but bias is going to be your best friend when you're selecting a jury, because you have to make snap judgments and predictions about potential jurors' behaviors. And you have to try your best to figure out how each juror is going to interact with each other, how they're going to interact with you, and how they're going to interact with the client. And so I realized that there was this ability that I had to identify not only what a potential juror said, but how they operated. So, if they said, "Oh, I get my news from Fox," and I see that they are only making eye contact with, other white men in the room, that allows me to make a snap judgment about how they are going to interact with, the first generation immigrant, who's also a potential juror, who may not speak English as well as they do, right? So over time, again, because I was undefeated, I became really, really good at using my emotional intelligence to make these predictions. But I realized that the organization that I was working on behalf of was really just a scaled out jury, right? There was that gap between what they said, how they marketed themselves, and how they actually operated. And the inability to close that gap was costing them money, it was costing them time, it was costing them trust with their consumers. And so that's why I decided to start BND Consulting.
Wow, there's so much to unpack in what you said, but I'm going to go step back just a teeny bit, because when you're talking about voir dire,
Sure.
you're talking about snap judgments. It made me think about on the flip side, like you take it in the workplace, right? How those snap judgment. I mean, you're doing that professionally. That's your job to do it and make those
Yes.
calls. But on the flip side, in the workplace, right? How people might be making snap judgments about certain groups, right? And how that could have a negative, potentially positive effect, depending on which group you're in, right? Effect as a student that's coming into the workplace, and they're seeking an opportunity, and they're going to be faced with people who are making these snap calls. Like, I love that question at the end of the interview, can you see yourself offering me this job, right? Like, is that one way to kind of suss that out and understand where you really stand? Are there other questions that students should ask, or things that they should do, just so they just don't end up on the wrong side, of the equation? Does that make sense? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I encourage people to ask the question if the interview is going well. If it is going poorly, again, use your judgment. This is your opportunity to, of course, you're there for a reason, right? You want a job, you want to be able to make money. They know that. But think about, the back and forth, is there a natural cadence? Look at their body language. You're subconsciously thinking about all of this, whether you know it or not. You're already processing it subconsciously. It's just bringing it to the forefront that's important. So everybody's heard of microaggressions, right? And that can be telling someone as a person of color, "Oh, you speak so well," right? You're so articulate, as if that's not expected. Or, but I also want to bring people's attention to micro affirmations. That's the nodding of the head. That's leaning forward, right? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. These are the things that students can begin to practice in all of the conversations that they're having leading up to the interview. But again, it's an opportunity for students to think about themselves, right? Uh, think about everything you know about yourself and how you present. If you were walking down the street, what would be the first impression someone got about you?
Hmm.
But why I like that question, can you see yourself offering me this job? Again, if it's going well, is it forces that person to reflect in real time
Hmm.
on their impression of you. It forces them to either see you in a role where your potential, is assessed, but can they see you as someone who is successful? Can they see you as someone who is powerful? Can they see you as someone who's worth investing in? And if they can't, you already have your answer, and this may not be the space for you, and you may not want to put yourself through the mental anguish of being in a work environment that is not going to nurture your professional development. It's really, really important. That's another question that I would ask, right? What upskilling opportunities do you have for people joining the organization? Do you have mentorship, a formal mentorship program? If not, what's an informal mentorship process look like? Uh, that's really how I would begin to think about it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
And then if we could we roll back to that time where I think it was your professor who suggested that you be a trial attorney.
Mm.
Yes.
Why do you think they brought that to the surface, and what kind of advice or do you have for others when suggestions are made like that? Like you have a great
Yeah.
voice. You should be in radio, right? Like, so what do you do?
Right.
What do you do with that moment? Yeah.
Right. So, um, thinking back, and I'm from New Jersey, and he also was from New Jersey. So I don't know if it was just the Jersey connection, but um, aside from that, I realized that he identified something in me I had not yet identified in myself.
Mhm.
And at the time, because it was not consistent with what I thought I was capable of or what I thought, that profession was, I rejected it. In time, he was right. I did it. But I encourage people to be curious. I encourage people to embrace the plot twist and just say, tell me more, right? What does that look like? Because, had I been a little bit more curious about that, perhaps, I would have gone straight into it or, whatever the path would have looked like. But, I appreciate that he identified potential in me and mined it. So he at the time I felt like he was picking on me, but he encouraged me to do moot court because he knew I would be good at it.
Mhm.
And aside from the fact that I speak with my hands, I can't help it. He'd be like, "I'm going to glue your hands to the podium. Stop it." But at the time it was so contrary to what I thought I could do because I didn't believe in myself in the way that he believed in me at the time.
So can I just pull on that? So I wanted to unpack, like, why didn't you think you could, like, really, why didn't you think you could do it? Why did,
Well, no, yeah. So no one in my family was an attorney,
Mhm.
and at the time, I was really fascinated with intellectual property. In many ways, I'm still. What attracted me to intellectual property was the connection, right? People have a connection and a fascination with and an ownership of ideas. And I just thought, oh, how can you own an idea? How can you bring that to life? And what does that look like? Now, developing leaders, providing leadership coaching and organizational development and design services, it's still that fascination with the idea of an organizational culture, right? How can you, as a leader, inspire people to grow a company, right? What does culture mean? Well, it's a framework for decision making. Well, how do you build that framework for decision making? How do you decide how decisions are made in this one organization, right? Because the way they make decisions at fashion came to mind, Balenciaga, is not the way that they make decisions, at Chanel. And who you're looking at and how you're trying to attract people and the type of people you're trying to attract and why ultimately fascinated me. So I was focused on that. But again, I thought trial attorneys just screamed at people.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they were traditionally older white men who screamed at and bullied people. And it was not something that I wanted to align myself with. So that's why I thought, I was like, I don't really scream, I kind of,
Well, it
I
speaks
have a
to
lighter voice. Is anybody going to take me seriously in this way? Yeah.
it
Hmm.
speaks to representation, right? Like you didn't see
Exactly.
yourself in the role because you didn't have those visuals cues for you to believe when someone said, "Hey, you can actually do that." I think it's really important,
Right.
particularly for Black women. You don't see much of us, out there doing these big or different things, right? And it's also counterintuitive to how we're perceived in society, right? So the point you just made, which is, oh, the light voice, or they're going to take me like that was counterintuitive to how, theoretically what you thought, but like what we could be or allowed to be in society. So I think there's layers.
100%. Yes. And I encourage students, one day you are going to be the person that people look to for support. So always remember that. So I remember one time I was going through security. I was a little late, but a mother, she was a Black mother. She had a little girl. Her daughter was maybe about 6, painfully shy. She's kind of hiding behind her mom, peeking around. And she said, "I'm sorry. I saw that you had, your bag with you. Are you an attorney?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "My daughter, can you talk to her? Because she says she wants to be a lawyer when she grows up. And I just want her to see that." And so it was worth me, getting the judge wagging his finger at me for being late. But it was worth me taking that time to get down on her level and ask her about herself and, talk about, things she said she loved to read. And so we talked about books that she liked to read. And, I on a 6-year-old level, right? Like shared with her the steps that she needed to take to get there. But again, that representation piece, to your point, Karen, is so, so crucial. And I hope students always think about, being in that moment, but also realize at some point somebody is going to look to you to be that example.
Yeah. I'm going to let Bob talk for a second, but I want to share this little funny story that is so similar. It is like, it's similar, but completely different. So a friend of mine, her son-in-law, her niece's husband is a Black dermatologist out of Florida. And had Thanksgiving together. And he said that there are many moms that bring their daughters to him. They don't really have a problem, right? But the ones that
Right.
want to be future dermatologists because they want him to
Right.
mentor them. So their way in is to make an appointment, essentially, and be like, while I'm here, can you talk to my daughter? Right? And like, don't cheat when that's their way in. So anyway, I just wanted to share that funny story because I was cracking up when he was talking.
You mentioned
I'm sorry.
earlier. Oh, no apologies, Karen. The point that you made earlier about selecting individuals to be part of a jury and bias, and we all have bias, whether we like it or not. I remember I insulted someone when I said I was colorblind, and she said, "Well, I hope not."
Yeah.
I got an education that day.
Although
Make it
15%
hard to drive.
of men are legitimately colorblind. Like
Oh yeah,
15.
there are. Yes, and it's like and what's really funny is in females internationally it's like 0.03 or something.
Mhm.
It's less than a percentage or something. But bias. So you were good enough to provide us some research that I think Reuters had either sponsored and been part of, and it said that 57% of Black women felt that there was some form of discrimination in their workplace, and 75% of Black women that worked in an environment where it was a private organization, 75% felt discrimination. So how does a young person of color especially a Black woman or anyone of color, navigate this in the first few times they experience it in the workplace, right? They're an FTE, they're a full-time employee, they're in the workplace, they get the job, they ask the good questions, and now they feel this, they sense it, they know it in that moment. What do they do? How do they navigate that? Do you have any advice or thoughts as a business coach?
Yeah. So the first thing that I will say is, no, you're not crazy, right? Because very often it's an isolating experience. I remember I was going to try a case, and I'm in a room full in trial call. You have a courtroom, everyone's waiting to be assigned to other courtrooms. And I was trying a case against two adversaries, and they're talking to their colleagues, and their colleague points to me, says, "Oh, you've got a great looking adversary." And they say, "Oh yeah, no, we're just trying the case because we want to look at Brittany." Um, and then you have about 20 other attorneys turn to look at me to, respond non-verbally to what was said. That is a more extreme case. But again, you may get the, "Oh, you're so articulate," or I remember I was working somewhere, and every Thursday the men were asked to go golfing and the
Mhm.
women weren't. And when I asked one of the managers about it, he said, "Oh yeah, but we just want to get away from our wives." And I was like, "Who's married to anybody here?" Right? So, um, when when you first encounter it, I think the first thing that you should do is seek support. If you have a mentor or if you have a business coach, you should, or a leadership coach, because you aspire to be a leader at some point, you should definitely touch base with them just so that you can get that mental reset and that support, because it can be a very invalidating, lonely experience if you don't talk to someone about it. But additionally, and again, employee resource groups are often very helpful spaces because you will encounter people who've worked there longer, right? Perhaps they have a little bit more perspective on things and they can provide some additional support. But it is an invitation to second guess yourself, but do not second guess your qualifications. Do not second guess your ability. That is something that I cannot overstate, is because especially if you're passed over for a project, very often, you'll lean into that imposter syndrome that will tell you that just because there's not a lot of people there who look like you, that there's some sort of gap in your competency. Um, that's not the case, right? Very often we have leaned into systems that do not allow for the diversity of thought, appearance, background, socioeconomic status that very often bolsters the success of a company. Many people haven't believed it. And you also have to, I encourage people to think about something. So we've heard this stat, Karen, I'm sure you've heard this, Bob, I'm sure you've heard this as well. If I'm assuming positive intent, if I'm assuming that, this person is just not even thinking about it, subconsciously, every second, your brain is processing about 11 million pieces of data. Every second,
Mhm.
subconsciously. Consciously, you can only process about 40 to 50. That's a huge
Mhm.
gap, right?
Mhm.
It's safe to say that even in the best of circumstances, Bob, you mentioned, saying to someone, "Oh, I'm colorblind." Like, your intention, right, can be the best, but it's safe to say you are going to miss a lot of stuff. And so I think it's important that, um, people who also are the recipient of, of, bias, understand the types of bias, because it can help you contextualize your experience, right? So is is this because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm Black? Is it because I'm a Black woman? Right? Is it because I'm an alum now? Right? Is it because, I've worked with executives who've chosen people because that person reminded them of their mother. So it wasn't grounded in any animus. It wasn't grounded in hatred of someone else. It was grounded in this nostalgia and really grief. Right? This person reminds me of my mother who recently passed, and it's not an excuse, but it provides you with the context, right? This person is making a legitimate business decision and choosing someone based on nostalgia, something that they alone are experiencing. This candidate has no idea that they were chosen. They believe that they were chosen for their talent, right? And it's just like, you make me feel like home. So I think that's also something that people should keep in mind.
So layered again, like you just never know what's going through people's minds and how it's going to affect you. But I love the advice that you gave. That is basically just stay grounded within yourself and don't second guess yourself, because that's the very first thing you'll do. And of course, you brought up mentorship, and you work with a mentorship organization as well. Like, what is the thing that the one takeaway from your experience there, or just like just with mentorship in general, that young people, even adults, because I think I need this advice too.
Yeah.
When it comes to having a mentor and the value of that, like in your experience, what did you see, and what do you advise students?
Yeah. So the organization that I led as interim CEO was a nonprofit, right? And in philanthropy, and in the nonprofit world, there are not many CEOs or executive directors that are women of color.
Yeah.
And because this nonprofit specifically focused on Latina and Black women, what I thought was so crucial was to be authentic in who I was, to show up. And I love to laugh, I love to dance, I love to connect with people, and the way that I dress, the way that I presented to them was so intentional because I wanted them to know it was okay to be themselves. They did not have to adapt to a mold of what they thought leadership looked like. And so the contractors that I worked with, the PR team that I worked with, I wanted them to be women of color to show that, we're helping you, but we're also putting our dollars toward other women because we recognize talent, right? We recognize that brilliant business leadership does not only look one way. And so anybody listening who thinks, oh, I'm a founder, but I don't dress like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, or I don't speak like them, or I don't even have the same viewpoints as them. It's a great thing. That's preferable, right? Because we don't need another Mark Zuckerberg, right? I will hear people say, oh, I want to be the Black Elon Musk. I want to be, the Latina so-and-so. And that isn't the point. You need to be you. You don't need to be a diluted version of someone else.
I love
It's
that.
important that you show up as you, because very often it's your background, it's your experiences, it's your special sauce that is adding to your industry of choice something that hasn't been seen before. And that's what I think is something that we tend to lose, especially when we're young, because we're just like, who am I to tell people that there's something missing? Who am I to, how can I share this with people? But, I think that's important. So even BND Consulting, it's not my initials, right? It's, BND stands for Be Nobody's Darling. And that's
Not know
been
that.
something, that's something that I have held dear to me. It's taken from one of my favorite poems, but it's, to me, speaks to, seek truth and do the right thing. How can I seek the truth of values-led leadership? How can I show up as a leader? But how can I, really harness the power of values to ignite better decision making in leaders? You tell me that you value merit at your, in your organization. Show me how. Responsibility, honesty, integrity. I want to see how that is baked into your organization at every level.
I love that. I did not know that's what BND. I'm my mind.
Oh.
Fantastic.
How we doing on time, Bob?
We're
I'll sit here and talk to people all night. Okay, so you gotta
we're about there, but one of the things that you brought up is being authentic, and I
Yes.
see you as very smart and with a high degree of empathy, and I certainly see kindness as well.
Mm.
And what advice would you give someone who wants to be all of those things, but does not want to be seen as weak because of bias, right? The bias toward kindness, or someone that has a high EQ or leads with EQ.
Right.
Any advice there?
I will forward some advice shared with me from a mentor, which is to stop approaching your power with humility. So I've held elected office, I've been in spaces where to be a woman who chooses to have blonde hair, and I smile a lot, right? And I generally have a sunny disposition. People may mistake that for naivete, or they may, think that there's a particular, that's how I choose to show up, because I value authenticity, and I don't need to present in a particular way in order to meet someone else's expectations, which may or may not be rational or in alignment with what I want to do. Because again, be nobody's darling, in that authenticity piece, that's me operationalizing my values. So for people who are showing up and who may be afraid, right? And who will say, oh, well, is anybody going to take me seriously? Absolutely. Because people can only, you can't bat away things, right? So when I was running for office, I was the first Black woman to serve as president of the Board of Education in my city. And at the time, people said, "Oh my gosh, she doesn't have any kids. So odd. What's happening with that?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't have any kids, but I have to live with yours, right? It behooves me to make sure that the best decisions are made." And every time I ran, I yielded the highest number of votes. Working with organizations, the nonprofit that I ran, I was tasked, people said, "Oh, she's too young. We don't know. She's inexperienced." And for me, it was just no problem, but at that time, research revenue went up, donor contributions went up by 16%, research revenue went up 41%, right? So, you can't argue with the results, right?
Mhm.
Either you are, you aren't. And I think we're coming into a space where the smoke is kind of clearing, and authentic leadership is becoming more important now than it ever was, right? Because we can say that Elon, oh, he's a genius, he's a disruptor, but we see the tunnel that was, supposed to be built, that failed, right? There aren't very many financially solvent companies that he's been able to lead successfully. Tesla has had to recall almost every car in the nation because there hasn't been a focus on operational excellence in the way that it should be. So for people who don't fit the mold, for students who don't fit the mold, you will show up exactly in the way that you need to at the time that you need to. But don't be humble about your purpose. You know, you can be humble about learning new things. You should always be curious. But if you know what your purpose is, that is something no one else can take from you. They may not like the way you speak. They may not like the way you look. They may not like the clothes that you wear. But the results that you yield, they can't deny that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Karen, before we jump into some rapid fire questions, do you want to highlight some takeaways, or is there anything else you want to dig into?
I got him. Okay. So, 1, learn to embrace the plot twists, right? That was the big one.
Yes.
If you experience discrimination in the workplace, first know that you are not crazy. Don't second guess your ability and your qualifications. I think this bears repeating. We don't need another Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. You need to be you, not a diluted version of someone else. Your mentor's quote, stop approaching your power with humility. You just said this one, don't be humble about your purpose. But I'm just going to end with, be nobody's darling.
Fantastic. That's awesome.
I'm going with it now. I'm going to run with it.
I love it.
When I was taking notes, there was one more that I loved. It was be curious. And
Be curious.
there was an interview with Nike CEO, and they brought up how there's 2 things that they look for when they hire someone: their ability to collaborate and their level of curiosity. And I loved that too. Be curious. All right. So some rapid fire questions. What's first comes in your mind is the right answer. Ready to rock and roll?
Let's do it.
All right. So what was your favorite subject in high school?
History. If you think about it, it's all of the tea over thousands of years. Like all of it. I just, I love a good dishing session. So history for sure.
That's good. How about your least favorite in high school?
Least favorite was physics.
Got it. And then what's the best advice you've ever received?
I like to create all of my options before making a decision. I didn't realize that I could do that. I was always thinking, oh, well, this person offered me this. And it actually took a coach to say, well, wait, before you answer, let's think about all of the different ways that this could work for you. I was like, I can do that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Nice strategy right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has there been advice that you thought was not very good advice? What's the worst advice you've ever received?
Be grateful. Not because gratitude is not important, but it comes from a space of scarcity and lack and not believing that you were deserving of in the first place. And I think making fear-based decisions has never worked for me. So.
Got it. Superpowers. What's your greatest superpower?
I will go with what other people have told me, which is to explain really complex concepts in a really simple way.
Nice.
Okay, Karen is nodding.
Plus one.
Yeah. Karen's nodding. Karen's nodding. And then what's a weakness? What's your greatest weakness, and how do you navigate that?
I would have to say it has been learning when to say no, because I think if you value service at all and you want to help in any capacity, any opportunity to help, you will jump at and say, oh my gosh, yeah, no, I can do it. and I'm a firstborn. I'm an eldest daughter. So anybody who's an eldest daughter knows you tend to be the family manager and the life manager of all those around you. But it's important to know when you need a break, and it's important to know when you're tapped out. So knowing when to say no has been challenging.
Yeah, that's really important. Last question for me: what's your why? Yeah, what's your why? Why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because I know that by tapping into decision making for the people who are in power, transforming their relationship with and their definition of power, that is the fastest way to spread positive impact throughout the world. And I'm really excited for that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for today and spreading some positive impact here with with Karen and me and everyone that listens to Momentum Now. We truly appreciate you, and I love your advice about being authentic. That's my big takeaway for today as well.
I just had so much
Love
fun.
that. This is fun.
I get to learn. I just love learning about people. And like I said, we talk often, but there's so much I just learned about you today, and you're amazing. Like I think your career is so beautiful in the plot twist, right? It's not a straight line. And I think it indicates that you can just make decisions for yourself as you go and what feels right. And it doesn't have to be what other people say it should be. Right. And I just love all the different throughputs and how you've taken your love for advocacy and built all these skill sets and applied it throughout every facet of your career. So I think that's a great example for our listeners. And thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you. Ah, shucks. You guys know how to make a girl blush.
Until next time on Momentum Now.